Hello, and welcome to the first Fireside Chat that we're going to be doing virtually. I have two lovely ladies here with me today, both working in counseling services, and they are going to introduce themselves before we get started on our Fireside Chat regarding mental health at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology.
Hi, I'm Kathy Tyson. I'm the Associate Director for Counseling Services.
Hi, I'm Jackie Wilson. I'm the Associate Dean of Students for Health and Wellbeing.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today virtually and being willing to answer some of the student body's questions regarding mental health and all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world today.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So our first question is from a freshman at Rose, and it asks, as a freshman, it was difficult finding resources on campus. What are the best places on campus to find some of these resources regarding mental health?
I would say the first place to start would be, I think the website is a great place for resources, as is My Rose-Hulman. I think for a freshman, though, in terms of more of an in-person experience, I would go to the Union. I might start at the Union, so physically going into the Union building and talking to really any of the offices there, whether it's Center for Diversity or Student Affairs Central Office, anyone, the bookstore, any office on the main level particularly can direct you anywhere on campus. So even if you don't know where to start, any person there can advise you and guide you in the right direction if you'd rather have a more in-person experience.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, our next question is, sometimes it can be difficult to make that first step towards getting help. Is there any advice that either of you can give to aid in that process, apart from just coming to the Union?
Absolutely. And you're right, taking that first step is the most difficult part. So I would recommend talking to a friend, having that friend hold you accountable, maybe even bringing the friend with you to the first appointment. Even if that friend just sits in the waiting room and is just a comforting presence, that's a huge deal. Can be a great big step. The other thing to remember is our first appointment is only 15 minutes and it's completely voluntary. So if you don't like it, you don't have to return. If you don't feel it's a good fit for you. The only caveat is if you're at risk to self or others, then we would need to do something different. But obviously, it really is your choice, and we want to provide you with the resources you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's a solid answer, and I think that's going to be really helpful for our students when they go to take that first step. So a bunch of our students struggle with stress and knowing about stress and being able to manage stress. So we have a couple questions regarding that. And they would like to know, what are some common warning signs that show that stress is not normal, but has reached a point where it's beyond acceptable?
One of the big things is to look at what's not normal for you. So if there are changes in your sleeping, in your eating, in the way you relate to others, in your studying, if there are any of those changes, that becomes a red flag. That shows you that something is happening that you need to pay attention to. So I would just pay attention to what's not your norm.
Okay, I think that's super helpful. Another question regarding stress is that some of our students would like to know, is there a noticeable connection between the level of difficulty and stress regarding their education at Rose and the mental health of our students?
I would say, I can jump in a little bit. We do have some pretty solid data that some of the rigor and the pace of Rose can be harder for students. Just the kind of the 10-week term is very unforgiving in terms of the timing. So you have to be, as a student, you have to be that much more self-aware. You have to have excellent time management skills from like day one of the term. Like if you need a tutor, for example, you've got to be meeting with that tutor week one. If you happen to get sick for a few days and miss a couple days of class, it's really like missing a week of class at a traditional college or university. So people really have to bear that in mind when they're managing their workload and their stress levels.
Absolutely. And another thing to pay attention to is to tap into the resources very quickly. So we have a lot of good resources on campus, like Sarah Forbes is an excellent resource with the Student Academic Success Center. She offers a lot of individualized attention with time management and different things and learning strategies. So making sure to take full, take advantage of those.
Awesome. I think that's really fair, and I think that a lot of our students are going to really look forward to having that information. So moving forward, there is also a lot of questions regarding friends and family, because we know that mental health doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody in its own unique way. And so a lot of our students are questioning if a friend's mood or behavior has changed, how they should approach them, and moreover, when is it appropriate or right to get outside help in regards to those situations?
I think it's always a good idea to get outside help if you have concerns about a student or friend. You know, especially if they're at risk to self or others, but even if you just have questions. We have a group called Rose Cares that has an early alert system. So talking to a faculty member or a Res Life member and just sharing your concerns and letting them help you make some judgment calls, that would be really helpful. Professors want their students to succeed, so they've got great resources as well.
Yeah, okay, I think that's beyond awesome. I think that everybody worries about that line, and I think saying that it's always okay to ask for help is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And on that note, what are some ways that students can seek help now, even though we are not on campus?
Well, we are still offering in-person sessions. So if you're local, just call our counseling center. We've got people on staff there 8:30 to 3:30. Just call and make an appointment. We also are offering telemental health. If you're in Indiana, that's real easy because we're allowed to go ahead and do that. But in different states, we'll have to research and see what the state laws are for where that state is to see what we can do. But we will definitely do that and see what we can provide because we want to get the resources to the students. We can also help connect you with local resources where you are and your local providers.
Yeah, if I was a student, I'd be beyond grateful for the resources. So thank you for all that you both are doing to help our students in this unique time that we're in. Apart from, oh, go ahead, Jackie.
Oh, and Hannah, I was just going to remind you at this point, you will post the counseling center phone number so that people can have that as a resource. I actually don't have it right off the top of my head memorized, so
that
maybe
is okay. I
do. It's 812-877-8537.
Yes, it will be on the screen, and I will link everything in the description box below. Thank you, Jackie. So I think a lot of our students are now getting a good sense from this talk about what it looks like inside the counseling office, but I think there are a lot of questions about what we all can be doing for our mental health apart from actively seeking a counselor, what I can do in my day-to-day life to be more mentally balanced.
So remember that mental health, like your physical health, is very holistic. You know, our bodies are interconnected. So things like your nutrition, watch what you're eating, making sure you're getting enough exercise, make sure you're getting outside safely, walking around in nature, hanging around with your pets. Some of the statistics I've read is that pets are getting a lot of attention during COVID. So they're really happy because every owner, mom and dad are home with them. So spending time with your animals, thinking about some new hobbies. One new thing I have going on, I've got a new app on my phone called Simple Habit, which is really, it's a fun app about meditation. So I can meditate a couple times a day just to refocus my mind, get some clarity, take a few moments to calm. They've got different meditations for different times. So you can do a 2-minute one, a 3-minute one, a 15-minute one. So there's some great apps out there to help you with self-awareness, to make sure you realize when you're feeling stressed. One other thing I think is helpful to do at this awkward time is really limiting your time on the news. I think the news can bring some real negative energy, and so really limiting what you're taking in each day in terms of your negative energy versus your positive energy, I think is really important. And then I think it's a great time to get caught up on some of your reading. There's some really interesting reading that I've noticed people are doing as they're looking back in time, because it's also important to remember that viruses are part of human history, right? Our forebears dealt with viruses, and it's part of the human experience. And so it's been interesting for me to go back and read what our brothers and sisters of the past thought about what it's like to live in a time of virus, just finding kind of a history lesson, and it helps me feel like what I'm going through is not quite so strange. So that's been helpful for me so think about what would bring you some positive energy. And again, it's about self-awareness and looking at the whole picture of your health.
Right. And just going along with that, keeping perspective, making sure that you're looking at credible sources of information like CDC. Some of the news coverage is a little bit slanted or hyped. And if you're feeding in constant states of anxiety, that's not going to be good for you. It doesn't help you to stay in a constant anxious state. So having that perspective helps. Like Jackie said, keeping up with the coping skills. For me, I love to play piano, so that's very relaxing for me. So doing things you enjoy, taking a break from your studies to do that is very, very helpful, and clears your head. So.
Wow, I feel like that was really, really informative, and not an ad for Jackie's app, but awesome. Go look it up. So I also think that it ties really well into our next question. Some of our students are curious, is it okay to step away from things that cause us anxiety, cause us stress, really lower our mental health barriers? Or should we face those things and face them head on? That's a question directly from the students. What are your thoughts, ladies?
I think absolutely. And it kind of ties into the media that we were just talking about. Setting those boundaries so that you're not elevating your stress all the time. I kind of liken it to if your car, if you put your pedal to the metal and your accelerator all the way down, your engine's going to burn out. Well, your mind's going to do the same thing. If you constantly are pushing, you're going to burn yourself out. So you've got to build in some different boundaries to keep yourself sane. And so limiting your exposure to different stressors is extremely important. Setting boundaries in relationships. There may be relationships that are not helpful to you. Jackie talked about the negativity. So making sure you have some positive relationships, people that are encouraging you, building you up. That's very important.
I think it's great to just, again, give yourself permission to skip over something. And if you need language around that, you can say, you know what, I'm going to opt out from that, or thank you so much for that invite, but I'm going to stay home tonight. Or, I've had enough COVID exposure for today, so I'm going to pass on that. You don't have to be unkind, just be direct. It's about, again, setting those boundaries in ways that are really healthy. Now, and there's some things that we can't opt out of, like there's some things we still have to do, right? So you have to be the judge of whether you need to push through the pain on something or whether you can let something go.
Correct.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, ladies. And thanks for the language and giving students the freedom to say, I am going to pass. I think that that's really important. And I don't think that that's something that we get told a lot in our current culture. I think we're in a yes mode kind of place.
Absolutely.
Looking ahead, I know we've talked a lot about anxiety and a lot about some of the stressors that are facing our students. Unfortunately, we know that's not all that is facing our students. We also have students who are really struggling with depression. And so a couple of our students have asked questions regarding depression and what that does to your body long term, to be depressed for long periods of time.
Depression will deplete you. It's like if you're born with a full gas tank and depression just continues to bring those levels down, and if you don't do things to build yourself back up, pretty soon you're running on fumes. And just like a car, you get to a point where you can't go anymore. So it's very important to use coping skills to build yourself back up. And on a bad day, you're at least going to break even, and on a good day, you're going to gain some ground in your tank. So if you kind of picture the tank, you can kind of gain some ground there. So that's really, really important. And there are a lot of factors that go into depression. So being aware of those and what those are, and focusing on problem solving. So if there are certain stressors that are making your depression worse, then doing some things that you proactively to fix some of those so that you aren't continually getting worse.
Kathy, do you mind, you touched on it briefly, and it's one of our questions here. What are some of the causes of depression, and what are some of the triggering things that lead to depression being a part of a student's life?
Well, there are some environmental things like you would find for a college student, the stress of academics, the pace, the amount. There's a lot that goes in there, but there are also things that students bring with them to Rose. Their genetics, a family predisposition to mental health issues, past trauma, and things that they've experienced. And then you've got things that are happening in the world around them, like the coronavirus, which has upended most of our worlds. So all of those factors kind of go together and just cause a lot of different reactions in us and in our mind. And if we aren't doing things to sort through those and cope with stress as we go along, they'll build and build and build. Ignoring them is not going to work because they won't evaporate. They're going to come out in some form or fashion.
I would just add too that when you're in college, oftentimes between the ages of say 18 and 25, that's often when sometimes new conditions appear for the first time. So you need to be aware, as Kathy mentioned earlier, if you notice, really different, behavioral changes for yourself or different ways of thinking that don't seem to be taking you in a positive direction, it's always a good idea to get that checked out because you may be experiencing a new condition that you don't know anything about. So make sure, again, that you're keeping that self-awareness so you know if you're starting to change to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think with everything going on, a lot of our students are really concerned as to whether or not the stress, the anxiety, and the sadness that they feel is a result of the times or is a more long-standing issue. Would you ladies care to speak on how they can tell the difference?
Well, some of that's going to shake out long-term. Mm-hmm. So some of it's really hard to tell. So I think you approach it the same way. Self-care, coping skills, really hitting it head on, and then seeing where it goes. If it's continually getting worse, if you're getting to the point where you're starting to have thoughts of harming yourself or harming others or, other kinds of escalating crises inside, then you definitely need to reach out for help. If you're able to manage it pretty well, keep an even keel, even though it's still stressful, you're able to keep up with your studies, stay motivated, get out of bed in the morning, go to class, then you're probably fine. So that's a way to kind of tell the difference.
And there was also a great resource that was sent in one of the earlier kind of weekly emails to students, and I think we've got it on our website as well. It's a COVID resources workbook to help you do some mental health assessment around the COVID virus to understand kind of how it's affecting you personally. And so that's a great resource to go back to if you didn't get a chance to read it the first time.
We also have some resources on our RHIT Spring 2020 Moodle course. There's a Coping with COVID corner that is on there. There's different activities for stress management and just fun activities as well. There's Resilient Rosie. There's a virtual whiteboard for writing inspirational comments. You can participate in the fun family fishtails and help us write a story. Lots of different things.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, for those resources. Before we shift fully on to our next segment of questions, I think that this one has true merit, and I want to make sure that this student gets the answers that they're looking for. And they asked, is it common for things that were once fun and exciting to me to no longer feel that way? And I think that that's something that they really need to hear the answer to.
That's a classic hallmark of depression. The fancy psych term for it is anhedonia, but it's where you lose interest or pleasure in things you used to enjoy. And it kind of goes along with that whole picture of, the sadness building, feeling hopeless, helpless. So it's depression's a continuum. So some people have really mild symptoms and then it gradually progresses and can become really severe. So if you're starting to notice things like losing interest or pleasure in doing things, your mind and body are trying to tell you something like, hey, there's a problem, you need to take some action.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that that will be really beneficial to that student, and thank you for your honesty. I think we've talked a lot about COVID-19 and what it's done to all of us and what it's done to the world, but I think our students have a lot of questions about what it's going to do to the counseling center in general and what counseling looks like now and what it's going to look like in the future. I know we don't have all the answers, and we're not going to for a long time, so student body, give us grace. But we do have some questions that I think you might be willing to answer, which is, were the services that were available in fall and winter quarter, what are still available to students now in spring? I know you said that you're doing counseling sessions in person, but are there any other resources that are available now that they need to know about?
Well, we are doing the telemental health. I think I briefly touched on that. So for students in Indiana, that's fairly simple. We can go ahead and set up sessions for them without much of a delay. But let's say you're a student in Texas and you need a session. You can call the counseling center, let us know where you're at. Then we have to touch base with our attorney, and our attorney has to look into that before we can start that session with the student to check out the laws in Texas. And the reason for that is because some states require counselors to actually apply for a license, a temporary license in the state where the student's at. And each state has different requirements for what they call reciprocity of the license. So we have to check all those out. It would be wonderful if they would just allow everybody to just practice normally and not have to have all of these different regulations, but that's not reality. So that's why there is a delay. So just so people kind of understand and extend us some grace up front with that.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I think that you both will have a lot to say on this next question. As we look ahead and kind of looking back too, we've had a couple questions about why our sessions are capped at the counseling center and whether that has any correlation to the amount of counselors we have.
Part of it is a volume thing, but the bigger piece is that we are a brief therapy model. So we are only looking at mild to moderate cases. And so we want to get students to the appropriate level of care. So if students are needing psychiatric care, we don't have a psychiatrist on staff. If students are needing intensive outpatient, we don't have that service. If they're needing inpatient, we don't have that service. If they're needing weekly therapy every week for the entire year, we wouldn't be able to provide services for all the students if we provided that for the one student. So. Sorry about that. That's my dog.
You're fine.
So anyway, that's why we have the cap on care, as we keep it with the brief therapy model and refer out when it's necessary.
Jackie, do you want to talk a little bit about stepped care modeling as well and how Rose is looking to go into more of that side of things on counseling?
Sure. The stepped care model is just an idea where people have interventions that match how you're feeling at the time. So lower level interventions for lower level stress and anxiety, for example. So showing, for example, moderate symptoms of stress and anxiety, you may want to have a new treatment course at the SRC or a new holistic nutrition plan, for example. And then that stepped care goes all the way from, again, lower level interventions all the way up to mental health crisis. But the idea with the stepped care model is as we intervene with people at lower levels of stress, anxiety, and depression, that can actually create a lot of healing earlier on to prevent higher levels of mental health crisis later. Something that's happening on campus as we look toward the future, there is a Student Success Lilly Grant, and there's also a Mindful College Connections Lilly Grant that I've been deeply involved in writing, Hannah, and you've been working on that too, that will bring some additional resources to campus, we hope, through the Lilly Endowment Foundation. One idea that we're looking at too is creating for example, a program of peer health educators. So peers who are specially trained and certified to help students, particularly at those lower levels of intervention, like someone who is going to be a buddy for you at the SRC, for example, someone Kathy mentioned earlier, to hold you accountable for following through on some of your care goals for yourself. So those are some things we're looking forward to in the future, again, with some additional resources to help us bring some of those to life.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for answering that. And I think the students will get a much better sense of what that means and have a better understanding what counseling services is actually meant to do for them at Rose. So here's the tough question. And if you guys don't have answers, that is a-okay. But as we look forward, is there anything that our student body should be looking forward to in counseling services when we finally get to return to campus?
One of the things that we want to, well, actually a couple things that I'd like to get started is a student focus group. And actually, you don't have to wait till we get back to campus. If you have some interest, you can send me an email and let me know that. But let me explain student focus group. I would like to get student input on program development. So what kinds of programs are students interested in? What would be helpful? And then as we go along, we shape and develop something and implement it. Then I would like that same student focus group to let us know, hey, how did that go? How was that received? And give us some feedback. Students have a really good sense for social media as well, and how to advertise things. So I'd love to have their help and expertise with that as well. The second thing is that group therapy is an underutilized resource at Rose. So we would like to launch some more groups. We would like to have students help us with that. So we've partnered with some student organizations already to start some different groups, and we would like to continue to do that and expand it and become really creative in doing that. So there are a lot of really neat models that can be explored, and students can add some fun names to them, like we can have Harry Potter themes and superhero themes, and for different kinds of stress management, really make it fun. Would love to have student input on outreach events and different kinds of things. So really would love to have more student involvement in the shaping of future events at the Counseling Center.
And just to chime in on that, I think there is a student group that has been active on campus in the past, Active Minds, and we would really like some input from that group as well, in addition to some of the other student partnerships we want, like with our Greek organizations too. One thing I also wanted to mention is Kathy and I have been in touch with some alumni who are interested in providing perhaps some gifts, some financial support to really help students, because as alumni, they remember how hard it was to be a Rose student, the stress that they went through. And so they would like things to be easier, and they'd like to share some of the resources that they remember with current students. So we're looking at creating a lot of different new partnerships. But again, as Kathy mentioned, we will need students to really make sure we are reaching people where they are and providing services and programming that people actually want to go to. We anticipate it's going to be a challenging fall. No matter what happens or which decisions are made, it's going to be a challenging fall. COVID and other things are going to be with us for a while. And so finding ways where we can work together and come together as a community to make sure that mental health is not a stigma. It's a part of what we're all going to need to work on this fall. And so how can we work together to make the most of the resources we have?
Correct. And just to tag on with the alumni had some really great ideas for some outreach events and different groups and things that they would love to even participate in. So being able to even hook alumni and current students up together with the Counseling Center being a bridge would be great. And in terms of partnerships with other organizations, just to plug, SGA has a mental health committee, and the Pan-Hellenic Society has reached out to us as well, and Unity. So different student organizations that are reaching out and wanting specific things or giving us input. We are so grateful for that and very open to more of that.
You heard the Rose-Hulman student body. They want to hear from you. They want to hear all of the things, and they're willing to work with you. And this session has been proof of that. Thank you both so much for coming and giving of your time to be a part of this Fireside Chat. It is not the traditional format, but heck, nothing has been traditional about this year. So I will let you guys close with anything you have to say.
Well, I will quickly apologize for my dog. You probably heard her eating. I could not control that, so.
I wanted to say thank you guys for watching, and I have to share a little cartoon. It made me laugh the other day. There was a little cartoon, and there are two dogs, and they're both holding their smartphones in their paws. And one of the dogs says, "I have a really busy schedule today of interrupting some team and some Zoom meetings." So that was on his schedule for the day, and I thought that was funny. And then I was trying not to laugh when Kathy's dog barked, because I thought he was the one with the cartoon, or maybe he was the one in, maybe he was the dog in the cartoon. I don't know.
That's right. So thank you, Hershey.
That's okay. Our pets are all getting a lot of love right now. Yes, and we are sending all of our love to you, Rose-Hulman community, and thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope that you have a great rest of your week.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay well.